We're in Los Angeles at a ModPo meetup. We've been discussing 13 ways of looking at a blackbird, and now we want to share some of our discussion. We're going to focus in particular on number 9.
And how many of us will speak?
There will be 13 perspectives on this section number 9.
Do you want to read it?
When the blackbird flew out of sight, it marked the edge of one of many circles.
The blackbird is perched at the top of a cattail in a pond. When it lifts off, it creates the smallest of an ever-increasing number of circles.
The blackbird is the Pope, and the Pope flew out of sight. He left many circles behind.
The blackbird is everyman. I think it's very Whitmanian, and when he's talking about the circles are never ending. They continue to go around and around. There are many blackbirds, not just 13, and we continually intersect, and it's the mind. Every mind is important. Every mind has a perspective.
I think in this, he plays a lot with our expectations. He's been doing that throughout the entire piece, where he kind of sets up something and then kind of takes it away from you. Kind of like in 5, we talk about innuendo and whatever the non-innuendo.
Inflection.
Inflection, right. It's almost like Beethoven talks about silence, where you set up something and you take it away, and there's that expectation of something to follow.
Cool. So what do you do with mark the edge of circles? What's this
It's
edge?
like him flying out of frame. You know, it's like him flying out of the frame of film or the photograph, or even like the border of painting. You know, he's already setting you up so it's flying out of sight, and then he draws attention to the frame, and you're like, but it's gone already. You know, so he sets you up and yanks the rug out.
Cool. That's great.
I tuned into the fact that he's talking about the blackbird and when it happened, and it flew out of sight, and it seems almost like this historic thing that's not going to happen again. It's crossing over an edge, but then there's like one of many circles, so it's just going to keep happening, and the circle is going to keep recreating itself or expanding or multiplying, something like that.
Yes. Oh. I think that the blackbird is never really out of sight. There's always a blackbird, there's always a circle and another circle and another circle and lots of blackbirds.
So for me, this poem was basically like 13, but at least 2 ways of viewing anything beautiful. You have sort of a vista view of it as a whole, as a global, and then you zoom in onto either something that should be in the spotlight or shouldn't be, sort of like a zooming in. And so finally what you're zooming in is actually flying away. And so it marks the edge, because even if the thing flies away, you still have your zooming in sort of tool, which could be the circles. And you still have the capacity to zoom into some other spot. And the blackbird is just an example.
When the blackbird flew out of my sight, my perspective, it flew into the perspective, the circle of another person's way of seeing.
So subjectivities get merged.
Yes.
Or intersect.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Well, the first thing that occurred to me is Yeats' falconer moving in widening jars. So there we've got a falcon versus a blackbird. And the center cannot hold. But coming back into this poem, the blackbird creates context. It sets the context. And so once it's moved beyond the edge of a circle, the circle's kind of done at that point. That's the end of that circle. And there may be other blackbirds creating other circles. But without the blackbird, there's just the circle, and it's gone beyond.
For me, the interesting thing is that you can't see the circle until the blackbird goes out of frame. You can't see the metaphysical, sort of the circle of life, while the actual blackbird is there distracting you. It's only once it leaves that you recognize that there is this great circle, and it's just marking the edge of it.
So you don't know what the edge is until
Right.
the blackbird crosses
Right.
it.
And there are a multitude of circles. Right.
I think I may be repeating what James said, and I didn't hear what some of the other people said, but I'm interpreting the blackbird traditionally as death, or the decomposer, the one that consumes what has just been alive. And its departure is the transition from a previous opportunity to a new opportunity, and there's always multiple opportunities within choice.
That's great.
The blackbird flew out of sight, and it was pieing on the edge of an unknown circle. For me, that circle could be the horizon. It flew away. There are many circles the blackbird could be sitting on.
So for me, what this poem is doing, or this particular stanza, is in the blackbird is what defined how we saw what was happening, what the scene was, but it really isn't what is in the poem or in the scene, but it can be also the absence of what is in the poem that is more important. And because reality is not fixed, and we have to put the blackbird there or take it away ourselves.
So, Chris, what did we learn, if anything, from taking one of the 13 stanzas and doing it 13 ways? You're on the spot.
Well, this is it's a good ModPo poem because it illustrates the openness that's possible, that we're not trying to figure out exactly what the poet wanted us to think, but there are in fact many different ways of looking at it, and it's the interaction between what's actually written, what the poet wrote, and how we come to it that creates the poem.
Can we get snaps for the 13 people who did this?